The following program is a Perils for Pedestrians special presentation. We're in Richmond, Virginia, talking with Linda Brody Myers. You're chair of a committee for the Metropolitan Planning Organization. What's your committee?
The Elderly and Disabled Advisory Committee, and I'm the chairperson of that committee representing the disabled and seniors of the Richmond metropolitan area and their transportation needs and concerns.
And what sort of issues have you been looking at for the MPO?
We've been looking at, for the MPO, things such as sidewalks, bike trails, Amtrak, Main Street Station, the reopening of that. We've also been looking at different things such as accessibility for the disabled and the elderly to be able to travel safely in their communities as well as outside of their communities. We're also now looking at the suburban and rural areas as well.
And before you moved into the city, you did live out in the suburban area. What was it like trying to get around?
Well, I lived in the west end of Henrico County, and there were no sidewalks in my particular area. And in the county, the sidewalks are very limited. Therefore, I was totally immobile. I was not able to be mobile as a pedestrian at all. And then along with that, the paratransit is, although it's in the county, it's very limited. So it was restricted, very restrictive. I lived very close to a large mall and a shopping center and was unable to go there independently because there were no sidewalks.
Now that you live in the city, you have sidewalks. What problems do you have here in the city?
Well, the sidewalks in the city need some work, and those that don't need work, those are pretty good, but most of them do need a lot of work with the roots of the trees growing up, popping, making the sidewalk buckle. Also, the vehicles that are parked on the streets, there's an issue with that. They're parked across the crosswalk or so close to the corner that I'm forced to walk into the intersection in order to cross the street, which of course is very dangerous. Also, this right turn on red and left turn on red is extremely dangerous. As being a former driver myself, I do realize and know most people do not even stop at the red light prior to making that right turn on red for sure. And they're actually looking across or to the left. So therefore, someone standing at a corner on the right, by the time they see them, they've already hit them. I've had 2 incidents where my cane has been literally knocked out of my hand by a moving vehicle. One was a right turn on red, the other was a left turn on red, and I did have the light. One incident, I was on my way to vote in the presidential election. So the vehicles continued on, and I was left in the middle of the street on my hands and knees trying to locate my cane so I could proceed on safely.
So you have trouble with rude and inconsiderate drivers. How about other pedestrians? Do you ever have trouble with them?
Yes, unfortunately, I do. Not only being a pedestrian, but being blind as well. You know, there are verbal abuse comments that are made that you're cursed, you're paying for your ancestors' sins, and of course, that's total ignorance. However, I have enough sins of my own. I don't think I need to pay for anyone else's. Then you have aggressive people who are trying to negotiate cash from you, and some of them can be very aggressive. However, I do come in contact with people who are extremely kind, but unfortunately, it's the bad experiences that really stick in your mind.
People have pets, dogs running loose or on a leash. Do they ever present a problem for you?
Definitely. You would think in the downtown area there would not be much of that, but unless you're out walking, you don't realize that is quite an issue. And let's not forget their calling card that they leave along. Unfortunately, I'm not able to see it, so when I know about it, either my cane's in it or my feet are in it. So they're very aggressive. They tend to grab at my cane. Mostly dogs. I've not had an incident where I physically have been attacked by a dog, and I am not speaking of service animals. I'm speaking of pets and strays and of that nature. So it is extremely dangerous, very much so.
And what sort of improvements would you hope that the city would be able to make over the next several years? What is your committee going to be advice going to be passing on to the MPO?
Well, we're pushing, and me especially, I'm pushing hard. We're pushing hard for audible traffic signals. So these are traffic signals that actually are audio output. They speak to you. Some will actually tell you, for instance, Broad Street, okay to cross. Uh, that would be a wonderful thing so that we can cross the street safely. And it's not just about the blind and vision impaired. People who can see even get hit by cars. We're not the only one who are struck by vehicles. Also, there are incidents of down here, there are poles with, and I'm not sure if they're utility boxes. I believe they're boxes for the traffic signals, and they're on poles, and they sit up about 4.5 feet from the floor, from the ground, the box does, and they protrude out from that pole about at least 8 inches on three sides. So my cane can miss it or hit the pole, but my body and face will walk right into the box because I don't realize there's something protruding. And I'm not quite sure, but I'm sure it's against ADA regulations, but I'm not sure of what the inches are of how far it can protrude. For some reason, I'm sticking to 6 inches. But in any event, whether it's within the limits or not, it's extremely painful and dangerous when you walk head on into one. Also, I would like to see when they're doing construction on buildings that they not put a fence around the entire block, including the curb, because when I'm crossing the street and I never get to a curb, it really causes me to get a little bit disoriented. And it's hard to kind of get your bearings on where you're supposed to be, plus you're stuck in the middle of the street. If they would build the little canopy type things where the wood little sidewalks, where there's an overhead so that pedestrians can still walk through that area, that would be wonderful, unless they're going to post someone there to assist you at those intersections. There's just a lot of construction and renovation going on downtown, and quite frankly, it has caused me to not come out as a pedestrian, which is terrible because I should have the right to be able to travel throughout this city just as anyone else. I am a resident and I am a taxpayer.
We're in Bethesda, Maryland, talking with Carolyn Wainwright, who's chair of the Maryland Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee. What is the committee?
John, the committee is appointed by the governor to advise him on issues affecting bicyclists and pedestrians in the state of Maryland. It's made up of members of the community from all sections of the state, as well as representatives of government agencies. For instance, we have representatives from the Department of Education, the Department of Health and Human Services, the Department of Planning, certainly the Department of Transportation, which is the department that staffs our committee, and several other departments that are integral in making sure that we have the best expertise as we look at issues and make some recommendations to the governor.
How is the committee organized to carry out its work?
Well, as you can imagine, and as the title says, there are two basic areas that we're looking at. We are interested in issues that affect pedestrians, and we're also interested in issues that affect bicyclists. And we wanted to take a look at what those issues are and maybe where some areas coincide. And so we sort of did a roundtable discussion to talk about what those issues were, and we came up with 4 areas that we felt would cover just about everything. One is transportation and commuting. The other is legislative affairs. A third area is education and awareness. And the fourth area is trails and tourism. And so the committee members are assigned to these 4 subcommittee areas and develop a work program that helps guide the work of the committee throughout the year. And as we work on these various issues, or as some issues come to us, we will assign them to the appropriate subcommittee for further detailed work, and then they come back to us with some recommendations, which we then forward to the governor.
What sort of issues have you been looking at lately?
Well, I guess the hottest one lately has been the issue of the ICC. As you know, here in Montgomery County, the ICC that's the nickname for it, it's actually the Intercounty Connector, is a proposed roadway that would go from I-95 in Prince George's County to hook up with the city of Rockville and take you across county and across county lines in a commute. There's been lots of discussion about this, and actually proposals for the ICC have been going on probably for about 20 or 30 years or more. Lately, the issue is whether or not the ICC will have, as part of its design, a parallel trail. This is an important issue for many folks because there are many people out there who do use their bicycles as commuting. And when you sort of take a look at this county, there's a lot of traffic congestion, and so bicycling to work is a very good alternative. So the question is whether or not a trail is a part of the ICC. The second question is how big, how little that trail should be. And the third question, of course, would be the funding of that trail. Our committee has taken a look at it, specifically the Commuting and Transportation Subcommittee has taken a look at this issue and made some recommendations. They have forwarded those recommendations to Secretary Flanagan. We had an opportunity to talk with him about the importance of a trail. Yes, we support the full 18 miles of a trail, but we also made the point that if a lesser configuration needed to be considered, that it was important to have portions of that trail as part of the ICC overall design. So that's been a pretty hot issue. For our education committee, they've finished a project that was extremely important, especially to school children. We looked at safe routes to school. Now, this is an international concept, but our subcommittee took a look at safe routes to school, and what we've done is develop a special handbook that people who are on the grassroots levels in communities can use to develop their own committees, can do an assessment for safe routes in their area, can know who the people are to bring to the table to talk about change and to make some improvements for children to walk to school. Why is this an important issue? Well, because many of our children could have the ability to walk to school, but it may not be safe for them to get there. Some areas don't have sidewalks, others don't have good pedestrian crosswalk areas. Another good reason for children to consider walking to school, it's the healthy thing to do. And so we've developed this guidebook on safe routes to schools, and we're very proud of the fact that it's currently being distributed among several of the jurisdictions. The Trails and Tourism Committee has been looking and working with the State Department of Natural Resources recently to look at how trails in the various counties and regions can be effectively illustrated in Natural Resources' new bike map. And so that's been an exciting project that's currently going on. Our Legislative Affairs Committee gets pumped up every year when the General Assembly begins to come together. We take a look at proposed legislation. We are advised by the legislative analyst as to how certain of these pieces of legislation affect bicyclists and pedestrians. We also meet in Annapolis in February to take a greater look at the legislation and also to visit our particular representatives in Annapolis. I happen to be, for instance, the representative for the Baltimore City area as a citizen, and so I make sure that my legislators who represent Baltimore are aware of the bicycle and pedestrian legislation that is in the hopper and what it could mean. And so I do that kind of educating to my legislators. So we get involved in a lot of things, and again, the structure that we have helps us to focus on just where our work ought to be.
And you've got a lot going on. How do you view your role as chair of the committee?
Well, I think that's pretty interesting considering the fact that I'm not an avid bicyclist. I don't commute to work on a bicycle. I do walk periodically for health reasons. I'm not close to my job enough to be able to consider walking to work. But what I do is drive, and I am aware, because I've been on this committee, of some of the issues that my colleagues in the biking community have brought forth in terms of wider bike lanes, safety for bicyclists, and those kinds of things, because I am a driver. So I'm now looking at those kinds of things. Certainly as a pedestrian and as a grandmother with young children who are in school, when we were working on the Safe Routes to School project, it made me more aware of some of those kinds of issues with children walking to school and getting back and forth. So I think one of my roles is as a facilitator of those issues. This is a large committee, and we do have a lot of work to do, and we also have to keep focused. So I try to make sure that we sort of stay on point. We have a lot of wonderful, knowledgeable people on this committee that bring a lot of experiences to the table, but also, as you can imagine, there is also this balancing act between, are we too much talking about bicyclists and leaving the pedestrian issues behind, or should we be focusing more on some of the pedestrian issues, and bicyclists are waving their hands and saying, what about us? So my job, I think, is as a facilitator and as a prodder too, getting people to think about an issue from a different side, because I may not be as deeply immersed in it as others. So I try to take that role just as a citizen advocate, looking from the outside and saying, what about this? What about that? How can we come to some consensus on these kinds of things?
We're in Nashville, Tennessee, talking with Tok Somashakan, who's with the Metropolitan Nashville Planning Department. Who is the Robert Wood Johnson Active Living Partnership here in Nashville?
The partnership mainly consists of a core group of four organizations. It's the Metropolitan Planning Department, that's who I work for, the Community Health and Wellness Team, which is an advocacy group, Walk Bike Nashville, another advocacy group that focuses on getting Nashville to be more walkable and bikeable, and the city's health department, Metropolitan Health Department.
And what do you call your partnership?
The partnership is called Music City Moves, and we came up with that name because we're known across the world as the Music City, and the project, the Active Living Project from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, is about getting people moving and getting people active. So that's the name we coined, Music City Moves, to get people in the Music City moving. And
what strategy are you following over the course of the 5 years?
It's a huge task, John. There are five main points that we're trying to follow, and these were basically laid out by Active Living by Design themselves. And it's a more holistic approach to addressing healthy communities and active living. The five points we're focusing on are called the 5 Ps. There's one that starts off with preparation. You have to prepare organizations and bring them together and do fundraisings and just form partnerships that focus on health and physical activity. The second P is called promotions, and you heard Laurel talk a little earlier about some of the promotions that we have going on. So promotions with events like Tour de Nash. Tour de Nash includes walking and biking event, health assessments. So doing promotions like Tour de Nash and Walk Nashville Week are some of the things we do under promotions. And of course there are PSAs and billboards and brochures and things like that we're also doing to promote active living in Nashville. The third one is programs. And what we're doing with programs is we've come up with 3 target groups that we think we need to focus on. Kids, of course, because of the increasing obesity rate across the country among kids, among our youth, seniors, and African Americans, Hispanics, and Asians is the third target group, which is our minority population here in Nashville. We're focusing on them because just like across the country, sedentary lifestyles are considered prevalent, and their health data shows that they have higher rates of obesity, diabetes, and so forth. So we're trying to focus on those three target groups, and we have the name of the programs are Music City Moves Kids. It's basically a Safe Routes to School program, and that's focused on the youth from the first to the fourth grade. The second program for seniors it's called Walk to Shop, and it's about encouraging seniors to walk to shop or walk to greenways. The third event focusing on our minority population is called Wise Moves, and the focus there is basically to get minority employers to encourage employees to use the stairs and walk to lunch.
What's the fourth P?
The fourth P is policy and policy reform. What we're doing there is we are rewriting the City of Nashville subdivision regulations. We hired a consultant to rewrite the way that the subdivision regulations are currently written to allow for more traditional neighborhood development, shorter blocks, more connected streets. Of course, sidewalks being a big part of it. So that's one of the big policy issues we are addressing under that fourth P. It's going well so far, and we should have a new subdivision regulation adopted this year. Is the goal. The fifth and final P is physical projects, which is what a lot of communities are currently doing. And what we're doing to that extent is, just providing more facilities. It's, a big infrastructure boost to the city of Nashville, building more greenways, filling in gaps in sidewalks, building bike lanes, building bikeways throughout the city is the fifth P. So it's physical projects.
I imagine closely related to physical projects is your bike ped plan that you developed a few years ago. How's that been working out?
The bike ped plan has been unbelievable. I've been in other cities before where bike ped plans and plans in general just sit on shelves and sort of collect dust, but this plan has been an active plan, and I think it's really made a difference. There've been tons of new sidewalks built. Probably last estimate I saw was about 50 new miles of sidewalks being completed throughout the city. When I came here 3 years ago, there were 9 miles of bikeways throughout the city, the on-road bike facilities, and now we have over 50 miles of bikeways in Nashville. So I'm pretty sure it's made a big difference, and especially for when we have our events like Tour de Nash, we really get to promote some of these facilities that some people really haven't paid that much attention to. But we do a big campaign on here goes this new bike lane on your street. Now you can actually ride through it and be proud of it with other people that live in other neighborhoods and other communities throughout Nashville.
Now, what's Nashville's secret? Why has it worked well here when some other cities perhaps it has collected dust?
Honestly, I think it's the people here, the people in the city of Nashville really care about the quality of life. And I've been to several neighborhood meetings because I work for the planning department, and believe it or not, that's one of the main things that's talked about. Is I want a sidewalk, I want a bikeway, and I mean it's something that's cared about here deeply in Nashville. And another thing is leadership from the top. I don't think we would be as far as we are without the mayor that we currently have, Mayor Bill Passero, who has made his agenda to focus on building neighborhoods and building the infrastructure of neighborhoods and making neighborhoods better. So and he strongly feels like that greenways and bikeways and sidewalks and so forth are a big a component of neighborhoods. So I think those are the key things. Without that leadership from the top and people who actually care in Nashville, I don't think we'll be as far as we are now.
And infrastructure projects that are bigger than just a sidewalk or a bike lane, what do you have going on there?
Well, there are tons. There, like I said, I mean, the sidewalk plan has recommended over $100 million over a 10-year period to just building sidewalks. Last year alone, we spent roughly $20 million on just sidewalks alone. The bikeways budget is about $1.8 million, which is also a lot. There's several projects. There's a bridge not too far from here, actually, called the Namumbrian Bridge. It's a viaduct, actually, and it's being redone. And believe it or not, bikeways are, a big component of it. There are huge sidewalks on it, and we're actually on one right now. One of the big capital projects that's happening in Nashville over the past couple of years since I've been here. This is the Shelby Street Pedestrian Bridge. We walked up it, and it has 15-foot sidewalks running right down the middle, and 10-foot, 10-foot sidewalks on both sides, and a 15-foot wide bikeway running right down the middle of it. It's an old car bridge, and in other cities, a bridge gets redone, and it gets redone as originally was as a car bridge. But there was a big push here to try to use it as a pedestrian cyclist amenity, because it connects East and West Nashville. It's an 80-year-old bridge. It was redone with $15 million, and I think as you've seen, it's a pretty big asset for Nashville, because people are constantly going back and forth across the Cumberland River that we're standing on, and I just think it's a big part of improving Nashville to make it more walkable and bikeable. So, and it's also a big part of the Tour de Nash event. This is where the event actually kicks off. It kicks off right down underneath us, and cyclists take off across the bridge heading to West Nashville to continue on other bike facilities that were just built.
So if I were to come back at the end of the 5 years that Robert Johnson Fund has given you, what would you hope that I'd see here in Nashville?
Honestly, I think 5 years is not gonna bring about such a drastic change that you may be just hoping to see. Things are just not going to change overnight. I think what we are hoping we can do is really honestly change lifestyles. The grant from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation is only $200,000. It's basically seed money to get this active living movement kicked off in Nashville and get it more prevalent. So in 5 years, when you come back, hopefully you see a whole lot more people on the bridge, using the bridge, and a whole lot more people using our bike lanes. So it's more of a lifestyle change than anything else. I don't think you're going to come back in 5 years and see that the obesity rate has dropped by 25% or whatever. But hopefully in the long term, that's something we can achieve here.
Visit us on the internet at www.pedestrians.org.